Okay, thank you. I've been asked to finish up today's agenda with a few thoughts about the future for social media. No pressure. I am, essentially, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, Future Foundation tracks and forecasts consumer trends. We do that through drawing on a huge amount of proprietary consumer research that we do all around the globe, and third-party data as well, and working with clients to actually kind of unpick what that means and do something with it. Within our work, we've got a program called Beyond 2020, which basically draws on our expertise of trends to think about longer-term horizons and operating contexts for different themes, different sectors, different areas. Within this, we've spent a fair amount of time thinking about different concepts for products and services, just really to kind of bring our thinking to life in terms of what some of the evolution around trends might look like, and really what consumers might engage with and want. And not surprisingly, social media and online networks runs through a lot of those different scenarios. So I've cherry-picked just a few that I'm going to share with you this afternoon, and putting them in the context of, I guess, a Saturday in the life of lots of different consumers 10 years out from now, so kind of 2023. Something I want to stress very, very quickly up front is our focus on the consumer. That's kind of where we start. That's what we fixate about. I think in an environment like today, where there are just so many amazing things, amazing innovations happening with technology, it's quite easy to get caught up with that side of things and actually not remember that often technology or social media, it's not the end game in itself. It's a facilitator. It's a means for actually helping deliver against kind of consumer needs, aspirations, and wants. And I think, you know, a lot of the uptake of social media to date has actually been about a tapestry of human needs. It's about being very nosy, wanting to know where our first boyfriend or first girlfriend is now. It's about wanting to keep an eye on what friends are doing. It's about information gathering. It's about connections. It's about all sorts of things. And I just really want to keep an eye on that consumer perspective as we look forward. I guess, obvious place to start, where were we 10 years back? You know, we've obviously travelled a very significant road and built momentum from this point. Only just over half of us in the UK had internet access. It was even less who were sending and receiving email on a regular basis. 2003 was the year that MySpace, LinkedIn, and Second Life kind of leapt into reality. But actually, it was only about 7% of us who'd done anything like get involved in a news group and chat room. So a long way back from where we are now. Today, obviously, you know, social media is kind of very much part and parcel of the fabric for daily life. Now, from our research, it's just 3 in 10 consumers who say they're not engaging with social media, they're not social networkers. And I think, obviously, the interesting perspective is the point of view of a younger generation who are coming through who can't remember life without social media. This has always been there for them. And if we look at just some data around kind of 12 to 15-year-olds, again, it's kind of a very small proportion. It's just 1 in 10 who now says in this age group they don't belong to some kind of social network. It's not always about Facebook. It's about other things as well. And what we're also seeing is that those who are active users, kind of heavy level of users, are actually very, very engaged. 3/4 are sharing a lot of content on a regular basis. I think what's really interesting as well is that we see a trend amongst older consumers that we're calling smart networking. A greater clarity about the kind of boundaries that we want for online engagement, who we're prepared to let in. And if we look at some of the steps that 12 to 15-year-olds are taking in terms of limiting who can see their profile, there's a sense of this kind of this appetite for control actually being around amongst younger consumers as well. We spend a lot of time thinking about the interrelationship of trends, thinking about the future kind of evolution, what the path ahead looks like. This is what we call a trajectory and in this case it's for our network society trend. It draws on predominantly quant data, forecasts, but other sources as well, really to provide a perspective and our own expertise about trends, about where we think the path is going. Network society really is our definition of just connected, networking consumers, using social media, using all of the tools available to them to kind of get advice and make decisions on a day-to-day basis. No surprise, it's an upward curve, a very significant upward curve. I guess I just wanted to pull out, I think, 3 things that are interesting in terms of some of the drivers. Older consumers, as I'm sure you're all very aware, the kind of recent uptick, or the most significant growth recently, has been amongst groups like 35 to 54-year-olds. And as we look forward, by 2020, we're expecting that over 70% of 55s to 64s will be social networking, or engaging with social networking. Amongst over 65s, it's still going to be a minority. We believe it's going to be just over 40%, but again, a greater sense of engagement. Mobile technology is obviously absolutely key and essential. It's giving us the means to tap into these networks wherever we are, any given moment of the day, no surprise there. I guess what it is helping is that sense of it's becoming kind of habitual, our expectation, and maybe it won't even be necessarily a completely conscious act for some of us, but actually that over 2/3 are going to be logging on several times a day, 10 years out. It's very much going to be a part of the fabric of daily life. I guess before we sort of start thinking or looking at some of just a snapshot of the different scenarios, I wanted to come back to this point about consumer needs, consumer trends. And in terms of thinking about the sense of social media being increasingly part of the fabric of life, pervasive, integrated into everything we do, I just really wanted to pick out 6 trends that are going to shape some of the scenarios. We track 90 established and emerging trends. There are many, many more that are going to be influential here, but I think in the time available today, these provide food for thought in terms of some particularly interesting evolutions that we might expect to see. I'm going to start with consumer capital, and this sort of echoes some of the themes that we've just heard. I think from our perspective, the proposition here is that to bypass ever tougher, ever more resilient consumer firewalls, that actually brand communication is just going to have to be 200% relevant to the lives of key targets, and very much also about a sense of really providing serious added value. It's got to get more and more and more worthwhile in terms of the exchange. We already see that consumers are getting very smart about the opportunity to monetize their own information, their own data. Again, we've just heard a little bit about that. And I think interesting interactive campaigns that are coming through from brands like Coke are really just making the point that actually now it has to be dynamic, it has to be compelling, the consumer has to be absolutely center stage with some sense of control over the process to kind of earn attention and engagement. And from our perspective, looking ahead, looking kind of up to 10 years down the line, to continue to earn some kind of level of online engagement, whether that's through social media, whether that's through other networks, there is a real shift towards much, much more personalized dialogue, much, much more personalized engagement that's absolutely necessary. And some of the early developments that we're seeing here, I think, point the way in all sorts of interesting ways. eBay's Hunch, obviously, I guess, gives a sneak preview of a world where actually online activity that we're doing, online conversations that we're having, and also kind of online purchases that we're making deliver a very, very carefully personalized and curated window onto a world of products and services that are out there for us. Other developments such as Smart Cart in Korea, which is a device at the moment, it's a trolley, it's a shopping trolley. You put items into it, it gives you real-time feedback and recommendations on the basis of the items that you're putting into the trolley. I guess things like this nod to a brave new world where potentially it's completely new territory for social media. And I guess this new territory might encompass things like machine-to-machine communication, M2M, and there are kind of interesting developments here. I guess for us, technology is finally catching up with concepts that have been around for a very, very long time. We've been talking about smart fridges for ages. It is now a reality through kind of products like the one that LG has on the market. But I think what's interesting is, again, this sort of consumer need, this desire, this interest in whether it's not a fridge, it might be something else, but in devices potentially in our home that actually can make life a whole lot easier. So 3 in 10 already say, yeah, I'm interested in my fridge being a completely proactive nutritional advisor, communicating with my supermarket, making sure that my fridge at home is already kind of stocked with goods, products, healthy food, etc., etc. Which kind of brings us, I guess, to the first this sense of kind of aspirations around control, around personalization, around efficiencies brings us to the first kind of snapshot of what a future social media scenario might look like. And here we're kind of envisaging very much a situation where you will have direct involvement or engagement from kind of smart things, smart tools, smart items in your home. This sense of them not only necessarily participating in a completely separate network, but actually being involved in our own networks for communication. So imagine we've got a consumer who's, lolling around their kitchen on a Saturday morning. No longer do we have that prospect of blighting Saturday with a quick trip down to a supermarket, packed with kind of, friends, family, children, etc. This is about a world where your fridge is communicating directly with your tablet, phablet, whatever it is, and a sense that actually, you could go for a completely automated option. You could stand back and have absolutely no involvement at all. I think in this instance, we're thinking that our consumer might actually want to have a level of say about what's happening, because simultaneously there is a curated list of recommendations, ideas for alternatives, other options that is scrolling down the side of the screen at the same time, thinking, you might want to take advantage of this. That's going to be drawn from a smart algorithm that potentially is pulling information from all sorts of different sources, other social media activity that you're undertaking online, a personal profile about your dietary preferences or family dietary preferences that you've already uploaded, the basics like recent purchases that you've made through your supermarket, and even, surprise, surprise, what's actually in your current fridge at the moment. If we move to mid-morning, different household, and this is kind of a slightly more gritty scenario around financial admin, never everybody's happy moment at the weekend. I guess background themes that we think are interesting here is the wider trend of networked family. That idea that family life is a lot more fluid. We've got adult children who are moving in and out of the home at different stages. We've got older relatives who are living ever longer, but potentially still kind of independent on their own. And I think in this context, we might imagine that actually there are quite intimate and very purposeful social networks that are now a very, very important part of family communication, inter-family communication, but also managing some of the kind of the day-to-day basics that we need to do, like kind of financial planning, personal finances. We're still exercising a very, very tight control over finance, a habit that we've kind of picked up at the back of the recession 10 plus years ago. And more of us are what we call kind of hyper individuals. We're very tech savvy. We're using technology in all sorts of different ways to really streamline and achieve efficiencies and greater returns from things like investments in our lives. What we see here is a situation where banks have had to do a huge amount to regain consumer trust and be seen to be transparent and service-oriented. So we imagine a situation where you might be able to link your own personal family network into a secure network that's been provided by your bank. You both have interactive screens in front of you. This is working around a shared family finance account, which sounds a bit scary. You've got the kind of details on screen in front of you. You're both able to interact with the detail, find more. You can make instant decisions there and then about different things that might need to be managed for another family member if they need help with their finances. I think continuing on this theme of this sense of kind of purposefulness, if that's a word, but coming back to 2013, I think another trend that we think is really interesting is what we're calling Gen Y4G. And this is about the kind of generation of under 30s who are, they're very success hungry, but they are facing very challenging circumstances in terms of, financial arrangements, in terms of the jobs market, in terms of all sorts of other areas. It's these challenges that are driving a kind of more entrepreneurial approach, a more resourceful approach, a sense of really the kind of power that can be gained through tapping into different personal networks, using online contacts, using your initiative in all sorts of different ways. And that sense that kind of, it will only be a survival of the digitally fittest, I think could be an interesting instinct that may kind of carry forward. Philippe Dubost is a very interesting example here. Some of you may be familiar with this already. He recently presented himself and his skills in the shape of a kind of, a product for sale on Amazon. And it's basically an approach that's seen his CV go viral all around the world and a huge amount of eyeballs, and hopefully he's got a job out of the process. It's not just under 30s who are getting smart, obviously, and getting engaged about the power of online professional and personal networks. Obviously, LinkedIn announced 200 members worldwide at the beginning of the year, and 11 million of those are in the UK. But what we're seeing more and more, and what we think is going to be important in terms of the evolution, is that sense that we don't just want to pump things out there. We don't just want to put a point of view, whether it's professional or personal. We want more and more to get feedback, like you would in the workplace. We want a sense of, as we share more of these dimensions of ourselves, more of our personality online, we want to understand the ripple effect of certain things that we're saying or doing. And over half of 16 to 34s say they'd be interested in some kind of service or device actually helping them quantify this kind of this impact, their influence online. Obviously, there are some initial developments in that direction, tools like Clout, but I think if we fast forward again back to kind of, the life of maybe a young professional in 2023 on our kind of Saturday morning, here we imagine a scenario where they are tapping into a personal dashboard. And effectively, this is providing a much, much more sophisticated barometer for our online influence, our online impact, than anything that's kind of available now. Really important is the fact that this will be able to measure sentiment and emotion and the kind of impact that's happening as you do or say certain things online. This isn't just about volume, it's about kind of value, about kind of much, much more multi-dimensional analysis. Our consumer is getting some feedback and analysis on their sharing performance. They've recently uploaded information saying they're available for some freelance contracts. On that basis, they might be getting feedback that they should be upping thought leadership content that they're placing online and actually just spending a little bit less time being trivial to kind of raise their profile a little bit. Alongside your own sort of reputation monitor, you might expect to see feeds from, not surprisingly, most trusted or admired brands, special interest groups, and this information being automatically reprioritized in response to different activity or different things that you're doing or seeing online. This kind of highly quantified social intelligence isn't going to be for everybody, but I think we probably have to imagine in our world of some hyper-individuals that actually this will have some resonance. I think interesting also is the concept that brands may be using the same kind of toolkit so that they are in a position to always know exactly the nature of sentiment that that is kind of happening in response to different things they may be doing or different things that may be being said about them online. So they're always in a position to respond effectively. I think this kind of strong consumer desire around recognition, feedback, is something that we're already seeing. It's a trend that's very much here and now, regardless of kind of where we are in 2023. It's about 6 in 10 of us who say, I like it when people give me some kind of acknowledgement, and that gets even more marked amongst young female consumers. And I think something that will be very familiar for all of you is that sense that contemporary status is very much about being an interesting person, doing interesting things, having interesting things to say, new interesting experiences. And in this context, something that we're seeing very, very clearly is the new, I guess, the massive social capital that is now attached to being a creative person, expressing yourself creatively. Indeed, for kind of lots of us, it's actually a really important part of self-fulfillment. Mobile technology has obviously given us the means to make sure that our social network, anybody on our social network never needs to be unaware that we are this incredibly interesting, creative person. And this is a trend that we term performative leisure. I think if we look forward again to 2023, and we're kind of getting towards the end of the day here, we think that themes like performative leisure, creative consumption are going to continue to evolve and shape future social media scenarios. If we imagine here, we're back in the first household with our kind of fridge-loving consumer. They're warming up for a little bit of piano practice. They have a digital piano. All digital pianos now come with an automatic link up to the internet. If you want, you can automatically broadcast your kind of performance and rehearsal, self-rehearsal onto YouTube or Facebook straight away, or clips after you've done it. You can duet remotely with other people who might be somewhere else, the other side of the world. Today, we want a little bit of a private, low-key session, so all of the network settings are turned off. But sometimes it's quite fun to share it with friends and family. I think from our point of view, that I guess the early showiness about performative leisure, that desire to demonstrate status and show off, will probably have toned down a little bit. It'll be more about constructive critique and feedback and using networks in that sense. But a slightly different kind of take there. And just really to kind of bring our day to a close, I kind of want to come back to the idea of or think about the idea of the role of social networks in maximizing kind of person-to-person connections. And again, kind of coming back to that theme of the network family here, but maybe extending that a little bit more broadly to friends. I think it's interesting that while social media has been building momentum over the last few years, the primary activity that we're using it for, and this has got even more marked, in the last 3 or 4 years, is actually for engaging with and communicating with people that we already see a huge amount. So it's adding an extra dimension to relationships, reinforcing relationships rather than kind of replacing them or undermining them. And we see things now where, for example, our natural sociability leads us to think about how potentially, I don't know, it might be a solitary experience at home watching TV, how you might kind of hook up with someone else who's watching the same thing. This is obviously happening in a quite straightforward way in some senses at the moment. But I think if you combine these aspirations, these themes, with new technologies like Ustream's broadcast for friends or Autographer, the kind of first intelligent wearable camera, then you come to kind of thinking about, I guess, a potential final scenario. And here we imagine it's basically Saturday evening. We're on our final visit of the day. And we have come to a house where there are a number of young professionals sharing, and there is basically a kind of network party that is getting underway and firing up. Lots of people arriving in person. At the same time, lots of people who are going to be participating in real time from other locations, whether that's in the country, somewhere else in the world. A little bit further out, but potentially you have a situation where you have some kind of, some sense of smart or intelligent decor. You're able to sync the lighting, the mood lighting. You're all playing the same music. There is a sense of a much, much wider network that's taking place. Around the different key venues, there might be various kind of interfaces, so you can communicate with people in other locations. You might have a situation where you've got a number of people who are at the party wearing intelligent cameras, who are picking up on the most interesting scenes, movement, activity around them, and streaming that to the other kind of party venues. And obviously a situation as well where if you want to restrict it, if you want the only people to be able to see what's going on to be the kind of the different venues or participants in that network, that's fine. Similarly, if you wanted to broadcast it out wide, you could obviously take it onto the kind of the web more broadly. But really, it's a party where absolutely no one needs to worry about missing out. So really, a very, very quick snapshot. Some of our thinking around future trends, potential impacts on long-term futures for social media, but very, very much thinking about the consumer at the heart of that. What might we want? What might be useful? It's a massive topic. I've been very general. Obviously, we will see nuanced patterns of engagement across different consumer groups, different levels of, different clusters of activity in terms of what people are doing. Some things may happen faster than anticipated. Some things may take much longer, and potentially, I hope not, but maybe never happen at all. But hopefully it's given you just a little bit of food for thought about future contexts and how social media might fit within that, and something to take away. Thank you very much.